First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shai Bashem, Rokakwadash. Yahweh to this world ignorantly calls God. Yahweh Shai to this world ignorantly calls Jesus. Bahashem means in the name, Rakah means spirit, and Kodash means holy. And that's all in the Paleo Hebrew. I also want to give double honors to the elder bishops and apostles of Great Millstone that taught me this truth. And today's video, I'm not sure what I'm going to title it, but I'm going to be going over this person's comments here. And he said, Seminoles, Native Americans, Black Americans, and Latinos of Negro or indigenous descent are part of the nation of the 12 tribes of Israel. Right, and this was under a video I made titled Latinos, Native Americans are 10 Lost Tribes, Biblical Book Proof. And I went into, the deep nitty-gritty stuff in there. And he also commented, Brother Manasseh, have you done any research on King Arthur? Curious. Which I looked into, what that King Arthur is, and it just seems to be a mythological figure. So, no, I have not done any research into that. I have done research into King James, but not King Arthur. But the point of this video is to really nail that point in even harder, that the Israelites were scattered and that the so-called Latinos and Native Americans are part of the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, this is a major thing when it comes to the awakening, that the so-called Latinos and natives are the Israelites too. Okay, not just the Negroes. Right, you got Israelites out here that are black-only Israelites. They believe that only the Negroes are the Israelites, which when you go into that doctrine, it's completely flawed. Because, when you go into, how do you determine you're an Israelite? Well, it goes back to the seed line of your father, okay? Physical appearance is just a hint, okay? It's not the end-all, be-all. So that's why we say that a so-called Latinos, Negroes, and Native Americans as a collective are the Israelites. Okay, as a collective, these people go back to the Israelites. But doesn't mean that every single Latino is an Israelite. Okay, because he might look like a Latino, but what if his father was an Edomite? Well, he would be an Edomite, right? Those are referred to as tares. Okay, so same thing, if you got a so-called white-looking person, right? He could be an Israelite for all you know. I always refer to the white dude in the hood. If you were to close your eyes and hear him talk, you'd be like, yeah, that's a nigga, right? But you open your eyes and here it is, it's Jake, hanging out with Tyrone, and Shanae, and, he just deep in there. And most likely, he's an Israelite. He just got that sauce. And if you were to look at the outside, complexion, you wouldn't think that. But that's why it says that, the Spirit beareth witness that we are the sons of the living power. This is a spiritual thing at the end of the day. Okay, and it says that Israel is as the sand of the sea and that we are the salt of the earth. So there's a lot of Israelites out here, and the way you know is that salt. If they got that sazon, as it says in Spanish, they got that flow. It's something you can't fake. You can't fake Jake. But let's go into, there's this book written by Diego de Landa. I always remember it, Diego de Landa. And it was called Relación de las Cosas de Yucatán. So, relations of the things of Yucatan. And in this book, let's see if we can go through it real quick. Right, the PDF is right here. So in this book, if you go and search up, let's do it here. You search up C. Opened. Let's see. Give me a second. See if we can find it. Or we'll do this better. Well, right here. So, I guess this is pulled from the Book of Mormon's Book of Mormon evidence traditions of ocean migrations, which the Book of Mormons is a bunch of false doctrine. But when it comes to, their understanding that so-called natives and Latinos are the Israelites, they're on point with that. But Joseph Smith and, creating a new book, that's going off. That's going off completely. Because it says in Revelation chapter 22 and verse 19, it says, 18, For I testify unto every man that heareth the words of the prophecy of this book, if any man shall add unto these things, God shall add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. And if any man shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part out of the book of life and out of the holy city, and from the things which are written in this book. Right? So you can't add or take away to the book. And that's what they did with this whole Book of Mormon. Okay, they're adding to the book. So what I want to get from here is a point from that book. And let's read this right here. It says, the Mexican historian Fernando de Alva reported that one group, the Toltecas, came to these parts having first crossed large lands and seas, living in caves and undergoing great hardships until they came to this land, which they found good and fertile for their habitation. He stated that they came from the west, sailing along the coast of the South Sea, by which he meant the Pacific Ocean. Okay, and the point I want is from that book, Yucatan. Arrival from the east. Right here. So it says, we're going to read the point of arrival from the east, because that was ultimately what happened. Is our people, okay, they were in the Assyrian captivity. Let's do the history real quick. 1 Kings chapter 17, or 2 Kings chapter 17. 2 Kings 17 and verse so give me a second. Second Kings 17 and verse 23, it says, until Yahweh removed Israel out of his sight, as he has said by all his servants the prophets, so was Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria unto this day. Right, so when you go into, what that's talking about, it was going into the northern kingdom being taken to the Assyrian captivity. Now, when you go into 2 Ezra chapter 13, and you start at verse 40, it says, those are the 10 tribes which are carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king, whom Salmanasar the king of Assyria led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. But they took counsel among themselves that they will leave the multitude of the heathen, and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into Euphrates by the narrow places of the river. For the Most High then showed signs for them, and had stilled the flood till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Arsarit. Right, so going into how, they came over here to the Americas. Okay, and it took a year and a half. And, when you go into the accounts of King Solomon, okay, it talks about how King Solomon would send the navy of Tarshish every 3 years over here to the Americas. Reason it's the Americas is because it refers to peacocks, which goes back to the turkey. Okay, it says, and you go to the root word of that in Hebrew, it goes into pavel, which means turkey. So the turkey is indigenous to the Americas, and it was 1 year and a half that way and 1 year and a half back. That was the 3 years for the Navy. So, these are the things that we use to be able to paint that picture and have the understanding of, who these people are. But when we go into this right here, it says a set of Mesoamerican traditions hold that yet another group migrated across the sea, in this case landing on the east coast of what is now Mexico. Those who possessed this new world in this third age were the Olmecas and Sicalancas, and according as is found in their histories, they came in ships or boats from the part of the Orient to the land of Potochan, at which point they began to settle in on the banks of the Atoyac River, which is the one that passes between Puebla and Cholula. According to Fray Bernardino de Sahagún, the account of the origin of this people which the old people give is that they came over the waters from the north, and it is certain that they came in some vessels. It is not known in what manner they were constructed. The first people who came to settle this land came from the direction of Florida, came sailing along the coast and disembarked in the port of Panuco, which they call the Panco, and which means the place where those who crossed the waters arrived. This people came in search of terrestrial paradise, and they brought as watchword Tamoan Chan, which means we seek our home, and they settled near the highest mountains they found. It seems that their ancestors possessed some oracle regarding the subject, either from God or the demon or from the tradition of elders, which is handed down to them. Right? Keep reading. It says, according to the title, the lords of Toltonicapan, the Quiche of highland Guatemala, in contrast to the Cachiquels, came from the east. They came from the other part of the ocean, from where the sun rises, a place called Patulan Pasivan. These, then, were the three nations of Quiches, and they came from where the sun rises, descendants of Israel, of the same language and customs. When they arrived at the edge of the sea, Balaam Kitse touched it with his staff, and at once a path opened, which then closed up again. For thus the great God wished it to be done, because they were the sons of Abraham and Jacob. Right? So, when you read this is exactly what we read in Esdras, how the Most High then shows signs for them and had still the flood till they were passed over. Right? This is exactly what we read, and this is from the title of the Lords of Totonicapan. So let's go ahead and search that up to get a little fact check as to, what that book is. So, the title of the imported Quiche Maya document is the Título de Totonicapan, which translates to the title of Totonicapan, or sometimes title of the Lords of Totonicapan, a historical record of the Quiche people written around 1554 in Guatemala, detailing their origins and ruling lineages. Significance, it's a key surviving document from the colonial era, right? So, when you go into what this is, okay, a written document, this is, authentic. So, there you have it. You can go into this, find your own conclusions, get some more history, but written by Alan J. Christensen. There you have it. Hard cover price, $126 paperback. Look how much it costs, because it has that information. But it says, and I'm gonna have to actually bookmark this just because this is fire. But right, that's from there. So it says, as reported by Father Diego de Landa, some of the old people of Yucatan say that they have heard from their ancestors that this land was occupied by a race of people who came from the east and whom God delivered by opening 12 paths through the sea. If this were true, it necessarily follows that all the inhabitants of the Indies are descendants of the Jews, since having once passed over the Straits of Magellan, they must have extended over more than 2,000 leagues of lands which now Spain governs. So, it says most scholars today would conclude that references to the House of Israel in these accounts are due to Spanish influences, but the existence of a variety of such traditions suggests that a belief that some migrants came by boat or ship from across the ocean was a significant part of their pre-Columbian heritage, John Terenzen explains. Right, so at the end of the day, this is proof that the so-called Latinos and Native Americans are the true Israelites. So I'll leave it there. Hopefully this was edifying. With that, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushua B'Hashem Rakakudash. Double honor to the elder bishops and apostles of Great Mills that taught me this truth. Shalom to elect. Shalom.